first book of the Bible, so go ahead and turn there with me. And last week, we got into verse 6 some, and as I've shared with you several times, we have these sections of Scripture, and surprisingly enough, they don't always follow the chapters that we see in our Bibles. Once again, the chapters, the verse numbers, when God gave His Word to man to be recorded, He didn't say, now, chapter 6, verse 1, verse 2, verse 3. Well, I'm going to have you do the video here in just a minute.
What, the living
The
dead?
Noah video. So what happened is verses 1 through 8 of chapter 6 really tied in. That was part of that section that we talked about last week. And if you remember that Hebrew word I shared with you, the toldot, meaning the account of, introducing these sections. Well, we start a new toldot this morning, and guess where it goes through? Look on your worship guide. 6:9 through 8:22. And so we're talking about this section here of Scripture that deals with the flood. Now, the flood is a story that most of us are familiar with, in some area or not. And I know I was talking to y'all last week. I've talked to y'all about this plenty of times in the past. My favorite comedian, Tim Hawkins, and his thing he does when he's talking about the flood, about how often, we see the Noah's Ark theme painted in nurseries, in homes and nurseries, even at churches, even in the children's ministry building. You'll be walking down a hallway and see Noah's Ark, right? You see the giraffes with a smile on their face. I've never seen many smiling giraffes, but we always see them, in that picture of Noah's Ark. Well, when you think about it, and this is what Tim Hawkins brings out, what does Noah's Ark relate to? The flood, right? And what does the flood relate to? The death of all humanity, except for, as we commonly believe, 8 people. And that's what we normally paint, on the walls of our nurseries, because we just don't tie those images together. Well, I've got just a short video here that'll help us to understand what's going on with Noah and the flood.
Noah.
There it is. We're ready for the offering now, right? We can go on our way. There's the story of the flood. And they had a couple things wrong in that. But, pretty much right on, huh? So the story that we're talking about, Genesis 6 through 8, really is that story of Noah. The story of the flood, the story of a righteous man. The story of a righteous man in what kind of world? A very corrupt world. And so, really what I saw so much in this account is, what we see sometimes on the weather. There's a flood warning in effect, right? How you see that flashing along on the bottom of your screen. That's exactly what God's saying here. There's a flood warning in effect. But every single county is listed, right? And I know personally, I get these accounts of how God moved in such mighty and incredible ways in history. And it's just, wow. And you're trying to grasp all this, the destruction of all of humanity. And we struggle with that at times, don't we? Well, maybe that's just some type of imagery that's going on, because it's tough to fit in that whole compassionate God and destroying everything, starting over, and the entire human race, along with the majority of, all other living things. All the animals that weren't on the ark, any plant life, that wasn't carried forth, everything is destroyed. And so, let me talk to you this morning about how God really walked me through that account once again. And thinking about exactly what He did. And I tell you all the time that my main prayer to God in almost every aspect of my life is, God, give me enough sense to see what you're obviously showing me, and telling me. Because I do think over and over again that God really lays out a pretty simple plan for us. We're the ones that usually often make it so complicated by bringing in all of our variables to the story. The but what ifs, or our desires and things. But the compassion of God is that He keeps giving me chances over and over and over again. Not only in my life, but in understanding this story. He keeps giving me those chances really to get on board. My arc, so to say. His plan for my life. And so what I want us to talk about first is what He was showing me and what He was showing all of us, all of humanity in the flood account. And the first are these parallels that we can draw. And so first I want you to see this connection that we have between the flood and really what came right before it, creation. Here are the first two verses of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. So what's covering the earth?
Water.
It seems like water. The picture here, though, is the earth is filled with chaos, right? God brought order to that out of chaos. So now here in Genesis 6 through 8, we see that chaos has returned. Here's Genesis 6 verses 11 and 12. Now the earth was corrupt in God's sight and was full of violence. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. Chaos. Chaos has returned. Evil, essentially, has begun to take over life here on earth. And so in the creation story, God commanded Adam and Eve to do what? To care for His creation, right? He told them, go forth and multiply. Guess what He tells Noah to do after the floodwaters recede? This is Genesis 8, verse 15. Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it. And then in Genesis 9:7 He says, as for you, speaking to Noah, be fruitful and increase in number. Multiply on the earth and increase upon it. So here's the last connection I wanted you to see back between creation and the flood. You even have a connection with nakedness. Adam and Eve disobeyed God. Evil enters the world, and what becomes an issue all of a sudden? Nakedness, right? Towards the end of Noah's story, we find that being an issue again. Nakedness becomes an issue. Both times there's a curse that results because of it. And believe me, you can see more connection than what I'm bringing up today between it. Why the flood? Why did God choose the flood? We have all kinds of connections with water throughout the Bible. Why do we baptize the way that we do? What is that symbolizing? A cleansing, right? A cleansing of that individual. And so there's all these connections that we see in this. Now the theme, and the theme behind the flood story is pretty simple too. Divine judgment on sinners. God's wrath falls upon the sin of the world and those living in sin. I can't think of many pages of the Bible that don't say that over and over and over and over again in all kinds of different ways. But that is exactly where everyone starts having issues, right? The compassionate God picture starts fading when we start talking about divine judgment upon sinners. We just can't look upon our loving God and think about that image, of, say, the flood and people standing upon a rock screaming, screaming for their life because of these floodwaters that are about to engulf them. And, I joked about that some, and when I related to you Tim Hawkins' little routine about that, why do we not paint that picture on the wall, of in the ark scene of the people there doing that? And we can chuckle about it and think about it, but I mean seriously, when you stand there and think about the people, a young family holding a child, and the floodwaters engulfing them, that's hard for us to swallow, isn't it? I mean, it really is. It's a difficult picture, yet in this theme of the divine judgment, you got to see this clear distinction that God is also making. It's really very clear between righteousness and evil. Genesis 6:9. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked with God. Genesis 7:1. The Lord said to Noah, "Go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation." Over and over again, he makes that distinction when he talks about Noah. Noah was a righteous man. Noah was a blameless man. Those words, too, you can tie them back. The blameless. Blameless is the same word that comes up in Leviticus on the offering you're supposed to bring to the Lord. Spotless offering, blameless, offering a pure offering. Well, that's what God continues to talk about Noah. Now, was Noah born in sin? Yeah. As we all are. So what made Noah righteous?
Trust and obedience.
Yeah, I put that in. Look there in your worship guide. Genesis 6:22. Noah did everything just as God had commanded him. Genesis 7:5. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. You'll see that every time God will talk about these things. And that's part of Genesis in 6 too. Right? He lays out all these dimensions of exactly how the ark is supposed to be built. And by the way, there's all kinds of stories of the flood. The Bible's not the only one. If you've ever heard of the Gilgamesh, epic, there's lots of floods accounts, in history. The interesting one is that you can actually look at the dimensions of the Bible. Are the ark in the Bible, and really it's the dimensions, and it'd be roughly the same size of a battleship. If you can imagine a battleship, it's roughly the same size as a battleship. Now you look at a lot of the other accounts in history of a flood and an ark being built, and anybody, I guess it was Star Trek, wasn't it? The Borg, weren't they in Star Trek? They flew around in a cube. That's all the other accounts are this huge cube-like thing. And so, even when you talk about what would actually be functional, be able to float and move around, the accounts of the ark go back into that, but very precise on these dimensions and how it's to be built, what it's to be built out of. Same thing with the tabernacle, same thing with the temple. But as God is laying out all those things, He always follows it with, and Noah did what? Did exactly what God told him to. Noah was obedient to the Lord's commands, and the Bible says that Noah walked with God. And remember that Noah did this. He walked with God all by himself. I mean, the entire world, right, walked without God. And Noah did what? Walked with God. I mean, our little cartoon there of the two guys walking up and laughing, I mean, that was legitimately what's going on. How long's Noah building this ark? 120 years. Yeah. I mean, he's spending some serious time out in the backyard working on this thing. And I've shared this with y'all before. What's he telling the people? The rains are going to come and a flood's going to come, and what's everybody saying? But what's rain? Yeah, it doesn't rain. So, yeah, he's definitely has a tough crowd. But the Bible says that the world the world that God looked upon wasn't filled with people that were confused about what was going on, or needed more clarification of what's going on. What does it say here in Genesis 6 and Genesis 7, Genesis 8? God looked upon what kind of world? Yeah, a corrupt, unrighteous, evil world. All of it except for one guy, Noah. Here's what Psalm 14 says. It said, "The Lord looks down from heaven on the sons of men to see if there are any who understand, any who seek God. All have turned aside. They have together become corrupt. There is no one who does good, not even one." By the way, those are the same words that Paul quotes later in Romans 3. "Will evildoers never learn? Those who devour my people as men eat bread, and who do not call on the name of the Lord. There they are, overwhelmed with dread. For God is present in the company of the righteous." That's the theme, of what's going on here, this divine judgment upon sinners. Well, here's the result. The second part of chapter 6 records how the Lord resolved to do something about this wickedness on the earth. Genesis 6, verses 12 through 13. God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on earth had corrupted their ways. So God said to Noah, "I'm going to put an end to all the people, for the earth is filled with violence because of them. I'm surely going to destroy both them and the earth." So why did God plan to destroy the people? I mean, is it a mystery? It's pretty clear there, isn't it? What was it? A random whim that came about? Here's Genesis 18. "Then the Lord said, the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great and their sins so grievous that I will go down to see what they have done. If it's as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know." Then it said, "The men turned away and went toward Sodom, but Abraham remained standing before the Lord. Then Abraham approached him and said, 'Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous people in the city? Will you sweep away and not spare the place for the sake of the 50 righteous people in it? Far be it from you to do such a thing, to kill the righteous with the wicked, treating the righteous and the wicked alike. Far be it from you. Will you not judge? Will not the judge of all the earth do right?'" I guess what makes me feel good about that is that means I'm sharing good company, huh? Because me and Abraham are thinking alike. That's that whole compassion thing, isn't it? God, are you seriously going to wipe out this whole community here? All these people? What if there are 50 people? Out of all these people, what if there's just 50? The Lord said, if I find 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom, I will spare the whole place for their sake. And then what does Adam realize, or Abraham realize? He starts counting, doesn't he? Well, I know him and him and him. And then, so what's he do? He goes back and says, well, as long as I got an audience here, the other thing is you can see his confidence gaining, because what does he do? He goes by 5s, and then he goes by 10s, and he starts taking chunks out of it. You see how the same story is happening once again? We see it in the creation account, we see it in the flood, we see it in Sodom and Gomorrah, we see it over and over and over and over again. We see it with the Persians, we see it with the Babylonians, over and over again. So here's what God continues to show me. Wake up. Wake up, people. Do you see the same thing continues happening here? God, in His compassion and righteousness, does what? He gives chance after chance for people to learn from it, to grow from it, and to see it. And I guess what seems so funny to me is how we read these accounts and we see these stories and we literally see it happening over and over and over again. And what do we decide to do? Complain about the way He did it. Not learn from what He's trying to show us, but we want to complain about the way things used to be, right? Instead of the way things are supposed to be moving forward. And so look at what obedience, look at what living a righteous life, look at what those things lead to. I mean, God clearly shows that through all of this. He shows deliverance through that. Here is verse 7. Or chapter 7, I mean. Then the Lord said to Noah, go into the ark, you and your whole family, because I have found you righteous in this generation. Take with you 7 of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, and 2 of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate. And also 7 of every kind of bird, male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth. 7 days from now I will send rain on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights, and I will wipe from the face of the earth every living creature I have made. And Noah did all that the Lord commanded him. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came on the earth, and Noah and his sons and his wife and his sons' wives entered the ark to escape the waters of the flood. And it starts talking about, these pairs of animals, the clean animals and the unclean animals. Talks about Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and their wives entering the ark. Here's another comparison too, is they entered the ark. Who closed them in? God did. That's what the Bible said. God closed them in. All the other accounts of flood accounts in history always talk about the hero of the story, the man of all the different. Most of them I can't pronounce. It specifically says they're the ones who closed up this ark. In their accounts, but in the Bible it says that God is the one who closed them in, who sealed them in, who protected the righteous. God's the one who does that. So this whole account talking about the floodwaters coming, rise and they increase upon the earth. The ark floated on the surface of water. Waters covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swam over the earth, and all mankind. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. And then it said the waters flooded the earth for 150 days. And so that's all of chapter 7, giving us that account. But don't miss out on that account that God delivered the righteous. God delivered the righteous is what you need to see in 7. And I'll tell you what you see over and over and over again in the Bible. God always saves a remnant. He always saves a remnant. Notice that the first verse in chapter 7 is that restatement again. Because I have found you righteous in this generation. Because of that, he's to do what? Enter the ark. Enter the ark. I'm going to seal up the righteous. I'm going to get you through this thing. You are the remnant. And then we see again and again God commanding Noah to do something, and he did it. Yeah, obedience. Sounds pretty simple. And I freely admit it sounds simple, but it is actually much harder, right, to do those simple things in our humanity. But here is what you must admit, is when mankind doesn't obey, when man is not righteous, so I guess that's what it means, evil, right? Acts evil. God acts based upon his righteousness still. Then what do we say? When we act evil, and God acts upon that, then all of a sudden we say, God has no compassion. Where is the love? Look at those poor people standing on the rock screaming, in the whole ark scene. Poor us. And that is what we say. But over and over again, we're given these chances. We're given chances in our life, and we're given chances to see exactly what God's trying to show us. We're given this record of human history. We're shown the rewards of obedience, and we're shown the punishment for disobedience. And we see these things, and we choose to cry unfair. And so the last point I wanted to make is what I call restoration. And so this is chapter 8. And so I'm going to read verses 1 through 4, and then I'm going to skip down to verse 15. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock that were with him in the ark. And by the way, and God remembered, that is a lot deeper than the way we read it in English. Not that God all of a sudden forgot. That his iPhone calendar, his iCal app reminded him, check on Noah. God didn't forget about any of that. What that word actually means, is once again, it's just talking about Noah's righteousness. And it says, God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of the heavens had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky. The waters receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days, the water had gone down. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. So now I'm going to skip down to verse 15. Then God said to Noah, come out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives. Bring out every kind of living creature that is with you, the birds, the animals, and all the creatures that move along the ground, so they can multiply on the earth and be fruitful and increase in number upon it. So Noah came out together with his sons and his wife and his sons' wives, all the animals and all the creatures that move along the ground, and all the birds, everything that moves on the earth came out of the earth, one kind after another. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of man, even though every inclination of his heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. And what I'm seeing here is the people of God who are obedient to his word. What do we see in that? The remnant, right? They're protected. They're shut in this protection by the Lord. But what does the Lord also call him to do? Fill the earth, yeah. To be obedient. What's the first thing that Noah does? He worships. He worships. I mean, out of everybody on all the world, all the earth, is Noah going to be somebody you can think of in his situation that's going to think of, I'm a blessed man?
Yeah.
But what does he do in that blessing? I mean, he knows he's in, right? He's in the ark. He's everybody else has been wiped out, but he and his immediate family. And the first thing he does is he acknowledges that, to God. I'm sure he was acknowledging it daily, but he acknowledges it. He builds an altar. He worships the Lord. How does he do it? In his own way, or by God's standards? He does it according to God's standards. That's why you have this account of, we always talk in our nurseries of 2 by 2, right? All the animals 2 by 2. Well, that's not the case. 2 by 2 of the unclean animals. How many clean animals? 7. Why was that?
Some could be sacrificed.
Yeah, some could be sacrificed. What about the others? They had to eat, right, on this journey. What were they going to eat? God's standards just don't drop all of a sudden because things are changing. But at the same time, he makes provisions for that. You're to hold a Sabbath for me. You're not to do any work on the Sabbath. So what was the deal with the manna? How are we going to eat? I'm going to provide you extra. And man, God does that all the time for us in our times of need. He makes provision in those times when we're supposed to be doing something else. He makes extra provision for us to handle those things. But we're still to recognize our dependence upon Him for everything. Just as Noah did. Dependence upon God for His very salvation. And I think so many times we get off the ark and it's like, whew, man, I'm a lucky one, aren't I? Look at my righteousness. Because of the things I've done in my past, I'm here today. Well, what's the Bible say? Because of what God's done, right? Because of what God's done, we're here today. We all have floods in our life. Some of us more than others. But, I don't see much difference between what we're supposed to be doing through the flood and at the end of the flood than exactly what God shows us over and over and over again. Every account, as I was thinking about this and thinking about how you tie the flood to creation, the simple one that I did, tying the flood account to Sodom and Gomorrah. Think about that with Lot. And the angels coming and telling him what's going on. What's he doing the whole time? But I need this. I left my remote control. I got to go back and get the remote control. All this stuff, and I don't know if I can make it that far. It's all these, buts and ifs and what ifs. And man, once again, I'm in good company because that's the same way I do things, isn't it? That, I want to make all these additional provisions that make it easier on me, better for me, when God is just so clearly saying, this is what's going to happen, this is what you got to do about it. That's why my prayer continues to be, Lord, give me enough sense. Give me enough sense to see the simple path and the simple plan that you've got laid out for me. And help me to worship you in every flood that I have. And God, we do just want to acknowledge